Queen Elizabeth, she was the Queen of England. She has quite the interesting life. She was born in 1533. She was one of the longest reigners of the time. I think she was alive for 80 years, and 50 of those, or around 50, she was Queen of England. Very long life for the time. And she was the second daughter of the infamous King Henry VIII, and I don't know if you guys know anything about him, but he had lots of wives, beheaded 2 of them, and he even started his own church to divorce one of them. So he was an interesting man, all to have a male heir who eventually ended up dying. I kind of think it's karma. But that was him, and so she was his second daughter, and at the time of her birth, she was somewhat celebrated. He wanted a male heir. She was the daughter of Anne Boleyn. But then when she was 3, he decided he wanted to go for a different wife, and so he was like, okay, I'm going to say that Anne cheated on me and we're going to kill her. So he beheaded her. And then Elizabeth was declared illegitimate, so then she had to live away from the castle, was basically ostracized from the family. So she kind of had some very difficult challenges already at the age of 3. Eventually, when I think it was the second, I forgot her name, but she was Jane Seymour, yeah. She was the one that had Edward, who died very young, but he finally had a male heir, and then once he did, Elizabeth was then declared again as legitimate and was third in line for the throne after him and her older sister Mary. And then after that, she started to be educated, and was even educated as a male heir would have been educated, even by a humanist. So he held her to the standards of a man, which was good because she was very knowledgeable for her time. She was fluent in Latin, English, Italian, and French. And she also studied theology extensively, although that wasn't really where her passion lied. And also, again, since she had so many challenges as she was younger, she was called to be like a 40-year-old when she was 6. So if that just gives you kind of her personality, she had to go through a lot, and that was not the end. So in 1549, after her father had died and her stepmother remarried, her husband was trying to plot for the throne. And so first he married Catherine Parr, and then was in charge of her son, who was Edward. Well, not her son, but yeah, her stepson, Edward, who then, once he died, it's kind of confusing, but okay, so he, but then after that, she died, Catherine Parr, and then Thomas, her husband, was apparently trying to get with Elizabeth and to marry her so he could have the throne. And then so she was involved in the scandal because you're supposed to be very pure, and people said that she wasn't. And she had to go under intense interrogation. And around this time too, Edward died. So then Mary came into power. And after Mary was in power, there was a lot of religious tension in England because the Church of England was started with King Henry VIII, who was her dad, to annul his marriage. Then when Mary, who was the daughter of his first wife, Catherine of Aragon, she was a Catholic, and very starkly so. And so she basically started the Inquisition in England, and so people were burned at the stake, all that fun stuff, and imprisoned. And so and then there was one plot to overthrow Mary, and she was, Elizabeth was said to be involved, but later it was proved that she was innocent after she went under interrogation as well, again. But then she was imprisoned in the Tower of London and in Woodstock at the time, and was almost beheaded as well, like her mother had been, by her own sister. So kind of had a lot of early life challenges. This is all when she's 16-ish, 16, 17. Got a just long list of the challenges up front. But yeah, eventually she overcame all of those. Once her sister died, she became the next in line, and so then she kind of, I'll go more into that later, but as she became queen, she was known as to be very pure. She almost had kind of a mystical aspect to her because she was the Virgin Queen, and she said she was married to her country. They compared her to the Virgin Mary and things like that, and so she also used that to always kind of play at her because there were a lot of suitors like from different countries, and so she would never quite tell them that she wasn't going to marry them, but she like lured them in so that they wouldn't get mad and then like cause a war, but then she actually never went through with it. And also, like, the Married to the Country, she used that as a way to kind of, like, influence people. So if she was, whether it was her privy council or her people, she was like, I love you. This is, like, this is all for you. I've given up everything for you. So you should give something to me, basically. And they did. So they followed her. Yeah, and then, so some of her major accomplishments, one was the religion of England. She restored the Church of England and added more tolerance into it. Still, there were fines if you didn't follow the Protestant rules, but it wasn't like with Mary where they were interrogated and they would kill you if you didn't. She was trying, at the time, there was a lot of tension, like the Huguenots, there was a huge massacre at the time of Protestants in France, and so it's just, there was a lot of crazy things happening at that moment, and so she couldn't quite go completely tolerant, but she couldn't like reform all the way to the Puritans, what they wanted. They were like the very heavy Protestants, because then she would piss off the Catholics, and then the Catholics, if they got mad, then they would cause an uprising. So she was like always having to play within this. So she actually did quite well at it, and she successfully, and there were several assassination attempts, but otherwise she maintained power. Also later, her cousin was involved in one of them, Queen Mary of Scots, which some of you may know her. We were just talking about her, and she was beheaded because she was implicated in the assassination attempt. Although, like, Queen Elizabeth said she didn't officially give the order. Like, nobody actually knows if she did or not, and she tried the person who did, but it could have just also been saving face. Nobody really knows. But that's one of the darker parts of her reign. Another key accomplishment was she defeated the Spanish Armada, and if any of you know, at the time, Spain was very, very powerful. They were one of the richest countries, one of the most militarized. They had extensive power, especially in South and Central America. And so when they found out that the Spanish Armada was coming, and it's like one of the best navies in the world, she decided, okay, we have to build a naval power well enough to defeat them. And they did end up being able to push them back. And then all of the ships of the Spanish Armada were destroyed in a storm after that. So it's kind of also a little bit of karma, I think. And then also, so through like her political prowess, she was able to keep power and be very respected as a woman, which at the time in the very patriarchal society, that was very uncommon. Like even like with Queen Mary of Scots and Queen Mary, her sister, they were very feminized. I don't know if that's a word, but it works. So they like, Queen Mary of Scots, for example, she was said to be like a seducer. And then the Queen Mary, her sister, like married the Spanish king. So that came into there, and he had more power than she did, basically. Also another reason why Elizabeth never married was because she did not want to give up her power to a man, because she knew if she got married, there would be no keeping it. At least, maybe on the surface she would, but not internally. And so also, another thing, she kept the support of her people. She went around England a lot and would basically go on all of her revelry, again, creating this mystical image. And they very much supported her until her last 10 years. And then like support started to go down. But then once she died, everybody was like, we want her back. But anyways, so yeah, she was able to do that as well. And also in her political prowess, she's very influential. I kind of brought this up earlier. Somewhat manipulative, but like she always kept people on their toes and was like with her suitors and with her parliament. She was like, oh, she'd never quite tell who was her favorite. Like you might think that you're her favorite the whole time. Like she's giving you a bunch of gifts, she's giving you all this privilege, and then she's actually giving the same thing to your enemy. So it's just like she always was keeping people on their toes so she could keep her power. And then also her influence on the arts. I hope you all know Shakespeare. She was one of his major patrons and was actually one of the reasons he became famous. And she also helped promote other arts such as poetry and paintings, especially poetry describing her mysticality, because again, she was trying to promote that image that allowed her to keep power. And then, so some of her insights that I found from everything was stay true to your values. So again, she never married, even when at times that would have been the easier option through like military and financial alliances. She also kept to her faith, even throughout the time where she had to pretend to be Catholic. She was Protestant within herself, and she never changed that, even though she knew on the outside she couldn't appear to be so. And then that was during the Queen Mary reign again. And then she also was very conservative with her military budget, unless it was completely necessary, like with the Spanish Armada. So she generally didn't go to war. There was also another time where she offered some money and troops to the Netherlands when they were dealing with a religious revolt, but otherwise she tried to stay out of things. And then keeping her eyes on the goal, whether like anything she was doing, whether she was studying a bunch of languages, putting up the facade, whether it be that she's a Catholic or that she's interested in this person or this person, or like putting her country above any emotion that she would have. Also, like during the interrogations, she kept her cool. She was able to make it through. And then she always put her goal of staying alive and keeping her power above everything else, and she succeeded. Also, resilience is key. So again, with all of her challenges, she chose to not let that bring her down, and she continued and succeeded. Also, perception. So perception is everything. She established that image because she knew if she didn't have it, she would lose her power. And then don't be predictable. So again, she kept everybody on their toes so that they would never quite know what she was going to do next. And that also helped her keep her power. And then, okay, so her leadership style, I called her a supportive driver because she was very set on the goal. Whatever she did, it was all about keeping power, staying alive, surviving. And then also she was supportive. That part comes in, although as a secondary, because it was more focused on the goal. And she realized to reach that goal, she had to have the people behind her. So she was very, she was relation focused, but only to reach the goal. So that's kind of why I had her as a supportive driver. Yeah, and I mentioned both of those things before. And so, her influence on me, as I mentioned, I have, she's my idol since I was 8. And I, read all the books there were about her, and, whether it be, historical fiction or anything, and her family. When I was younger, I knew, every single wife of King Henry, their whole story, why they were beheaded, everything, and then to her and Queen Mary, her sister, also Queen Mary of Scots. I studied the period very extensively, but always because I loved her. And so she's just, also the fact that she was able to stay so strong and to push through challenges. When I was younger, I had to push through a lot of things, especially in the family, and that kind of, I looked up to her for that, and also just keeping cool and keeping her head on straight, even in all the chaos. I kept that, and also just staying strong through everything that she did. So, yeah, I don't know, she's pretty cool. And then I have a video to show you. It's actually the trailer to that movie. This kind of just shows some of her later life challenges and a little bit of her personality, I think.
You will need all your strength in the days to come.
No reason to fear.
There are hard days coming, but I am no prophet. I see no more than the shadows of ghosts.
This Spanish Armada is at sea with an army of 10,000 men.
Pirates were barely a day away, Majesty.
Walter Raleigh, Majesty.
This man is a pirate.
Spain is no friend of England. The more gold I take, Majesty, the safer you will be.
He interests me. Talk to him. I care for your safety. Threats to your person are real.
Spain intends to place Mary Stuart on our country's throne. Mine to be assassinated. Tell your king I fear neither him nor his armies.
There is something coming that will sweep away your pride.
I too can command the wind, sir! I have a hurricane in me that will set Spain bare when you dare to try me!
Our mission is to kill Queen. We will not fear the coming of the shadow of death.
feel too much, hurt too much. All too soon we die. But we do have the chance of love.
Oh, I envy you, Wes. You're free to have what I cannot have.
Forgive me, Majesty. I have failed you.
This armada that sails against us carries the Inquisition.
We cannot be defeated. The Spanish will overwhelm us.
Since when were you so afraid?
When the storm breaks, some are dumb with terror, and some spread their wings and soar.
Let them come with the armies of hell! They will not harm!
My God, England will not fall while I am queen.
Yeah, so I mean that just kind of shows some of the challenges she had to face and just how strong she was and how she had to sacrifice to. I don't know. I thought that was a good film. Although I didn't see this till like several years later, even though I was a huge fan. I was like, I'm not gonna watch a movie because it's not gonna portray her correctly. So this one actually did a good job. And then okay, so here's my leadership model. This is picture this, so I hope it's okay.
Beautiful.
Oh, thank you. And so, yeah, I'll put all the things up. But basically, so I had the roots as her birthright and her familial duty. So that's like the duty of her family and the birthright to the throne. And that's why there's the Tudor rose, which is their crest. And that's kind of like where her power, or like the birth of her power was. I mean, like if she wasn't born in that family, she wouldn't have had any of this happen. So it's kind of the start of everything. Then at her roots is her love of country, because I feel like that led her to do everything that she did, besides just the need for survival. And then next is her strength, which as you'll see, I had, it kind of carried her through, and I angled this right here because I don't know if you guys know, but trees, when they're young, if they're like hit by something, especially aspen trees, you can see like they'll grow like this. So like that obstruction, they'll like grow beyond it, but it will still have like shaped them. So that's why I kind of made it like that. And then her, and that was her resilience to grow beyond it and to not being taken down as a tree. And then also like her early life challenges, that's like kind of the obstruction that hit her when she was younger. And that includes just being ostracized, having to deal with scandals and being imprisoned and almost beheaded, all of that. And then her resilience leads to her, what led to her wisdom after everything. So that all taught her to come forward and not to bring it down. It like taught her how to rule, I think, and how she would survive in the world. She had to learn it from a young age, of course. But and then her commitment is like her commitment to her cause of both surviving and leading her country. And then her determination kept her going throughout everything, no matter how the sacrifice or no matter the challenges that came towards her. And then here's some of her characteristics that she used to lead and to gain followers. So her charm, which she used to keep everybody on their toes and like to show that she loved people and that they loved her, then they would love her back, basically. Even one guy said, we loved her, it was one courtier, and he was like, we loved her because she said she loved us. So it's kind of like that. I mean, I think she did, but we can never know because we don't know her. Also cunning, so that was how she kind of went around court politics, the suitors, how she was able to keep herself going and like establish power as a woman in the time. Also unpredictability, so nobody ever knew quite what she was going to do next, which also helped her to like both gain followers because they respected that, and also to make sure that nobody was able to kind of undermine her. And then decisiveness. Once she decided something, she definitely stuck to it. She was very stubborn and very set in her ways. So I think that also helped to have people follow her because they knew that if she said something, she was going to do it. And then I had the leaves as her followers. So they grow from what she does. And like as she, because like when she was younger, nobody thought she would become the queen that she did and one of the people to lead them into a golden age of England. So, and as she grew up and used all of these, she did gain her followers. And then the acorns are her legacy. So I kind of imagined it as if like they fell, like, and eventually they would grow into trees themselves. And so that's kind of how she impacted England's history. And so, yeah, there's my model.